Welcome, Metallurgists, another episode of the Wednesday Album Club. We're here to talk about a fun record. I'm Marty. I'm one of your hosts for the event here tonight. And directly south of heaven here is, what's going on, Jim?
Oh, not much, man. It's a nice Wednesday evening. I just watched a very disturbing murder show on Max, and has become my habit lately. And so I'm trying to clear my brain and think about metal now.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I need to stop watching that stuff. I had a nightmare about the last one I watched last night, and then I watched another one. And I'm a glutton for.
I watched tons of that shit, man. I can't. It's like watching I tell Marty it's my stories. Watching the doggone soaps. It's terrible.
I think it just makes me feel better. It makes me like really appreciative of my own life. You know what I mean? Like somehow life affirming to watch horrific stories about others' worst day ever.
Well, you look over at your wife and I wonder if she's poisoning me a little bit every day.
Right.
Wood alcohol can't be traced. Thanks to those shows, you know these things.
Is that apple or arsenic?
It tastes a little like poison. Yeah.
Either way,
is it like an actual a good series, or is it like a forensic files sort of like old school 90s?
Well, I do watch the old Forensic Files, but this one is a new one. Evil Lives Here,
yes, I watched those.
It's uber disturbing. They tell it from the perspective of like victims or family members. Like they're actually the ones doing the story, so it makes it twice as horrific. So
yes,
I feel bad somehow.
Well, hopefully you've been listening to something that hasn't been causing you nightmares. What have you been spinning?
No, though I'm sure back in the day, this probably gave my own parents nightmares when I would listen to this. But Back to the Frost here, always good. I found myself air guitaring in the living room as my son looked on, probably trying not to roll his eyes.
Yeah.
Always good for that. And don't take this one personally, Marty.
I love it. That's great. A great little live EP. Fun.
Yeah, I don't usually like live metal. I like live music and other genres because it makes them sound heavier. But live metal, I'd rather hear Stiga. But this one's it's a good time. It's a fun record, and and Bobby sounds great on it, man. His singing is awesome on it.
Yep.
And a little bit of Agalock debut over there. Always good to return to this stuff. Yep. But yeah, man. And I've been listening to a lot of new stuff yet, but I'm not going to pull that because I don't have the physical copies in yet, but they're on the way.
Right on.
You'll be seeing that.
Cool. Okay. Good to see you. Kellen, good to see you as well. You just put up a new video today. Investigating European power metal. It's a new series that's starting. Very good. That Domine is something I'm going to have to check out. It sounds really killer.
Yeah. I'm it's got a few comments, Mike, over in the chat, and it's been a major discovery for me. I'm going to go check out a little more of their catalog. But in terms of things I've been spinning, that's the one I wanted to mention here tonight. For those who may have missed it, I put out a video earlier, and I brought up this Domine release, which is Stormbringer. Just a unique comparison between the Michael Whalen, Elric, and this gentleman. Totally different thing.
The low rent,
rent
artist version of it.
Clearly, this is like the I've been living off of heroin over the past year. Sort of he's lost 50 pounds kind of element, but it plays like they do. It's on Dragonheart Records, I mentioned. So they have a little bit more of an epic heavy metal thing going on, but really dig this band. I pulled out this one. This is Dantesco. They're from Puerto Rico. And I think this is called 7 Years of Battle on Stormspell Records. Anyway, if you dig, they kind of have a little bit more. I would say if you're pulling away from the power metal thing, this is straight up kind of epic heavy metal, epic doom. They had their lead singer, they recently split up because the vocalist passed away not that long ago. I want to say a year or two ago. But been jamming this one. And last one I'll show here. I just got this in the mail this week. This is a new one from Diabolic Oath. I want to get the name right here. Oracular Hexations. But you'll probably see me talking about this on a future heavy metallurgy review. Band out of, I believe, Portland that do kind of a blackened death metal, but they play fretless. So it's kind of an interesting sort of bass guitar sound for sure.
Cool. Love it. I love that sound on bass. Fretless bass is killer. Well, cool. Good to see you. TJ, what's going on, brother?
So, some of you might remember we mentioned we played a show in Marquette last weekend. We played with some really killer bands down there, up there. We played with Wood Cult, who we've mentioned on here a few times before. Some local boys, just killer kind of. Yeah, great.
It was their first show.
Yeah, and they absolutely crushed. They really did. I was. They went on right before us, and I was kind of getting a little aggravated because they were going to make me work for it, and they did. It's like, you freaking bastards. But but that's fine. They did great, man. The crowd just loved them. But then we also played with a band from Nogany called The Hard. I've been checking this out. This is the 420 EP that they put out for that show. It's kind of hard to track their music down on the interwebs, but they're really cool. They just absolutely crushed up there.
I was surprised.
Yeah, and they just kind of heavy and skanky and just really good. They just really brought it. They ripped. And then we played with a band from Milwaukee called Horrid Mass. And this is really kind of a HM2 dripping undergang kind of death metal with noise shit. It's just, these guys just crushed. They were so cool.
They were really good.
And yeah, and this is on Spotify if you want to check it out. It's called Formless Dead. But very cool. And then I finally got my physical copy of the new My Dying Bride, and so I've been just picking up on that more. That cover's really cool. I don't know if that spot UV is popping up here and there, but there it is. But anyway, and so as far as how I'm doing, I have a little story. I want to deviate for a minute because I feel like I need to share this because I'm suffering right now. And so I want to let you guys know why. So for those of you who don't know, I live in a rather rural area, and this room, this magnificent parlor that I'm sitting in right now is attached to my the sex condor. It lives out there. But it's attached to my workshop on the side, and it's separate from my house. And this part of the building, rather than sitting on a foundation, is on footings. And so there's airspace underneath. Well, there's a spot under here on this end where there's a hole where the critters like to make homes periodically. And it's generally rabbits. Except for this year, the skunks have found it. And so I've had a little bit of issue with them, but nothing real bad. Well, until last night or this morning, 1 a.m., I was just getting ready to go to bed. I was finishing up my assault on the universe and Starfield, and I was getting ready to go to bed. And the dogs were outside, and I hear they quit barking, and then I smelled the skunk. and then my mother, who lives with my wife and I, she let the dogs in before I could get up to the door, and my beagle
started rolling on the carpet.
Had been sauced, had been thoroughly bombed, doused by the skunk. And so at 1:30 in the morning, I was giving tomato soup baths to my dog. Well, as I mentioned previously, the skunk, the back end of the yard is right here, and the hole is right there. And well, I was hoping against hope, but not to be. So right now, I am utterly just dying of inhalation exposure to skunk fumes. So
It's
just so you
awful.
know,
it's awful.
I am just absolutely swamped in it right now. I've got my my wax burner zombie head going over there, but I am suffering for the metallurgy. I am suffering for this crap. I hope you're happy. I'm probably going to keel over dead in a little bit, and if you happen to see it, you're welcome. So there it is. There's my stupid little story about the stinking room I'm sitting in right now.
I'm laughing, but you know, Butterfly's been sprayed twice with
I know.
and it's absolutely horrible.
Yeah, it's you know, I had hoped
Ugh.
that stupid skunk had maybe done it outside the fence and then, you know, over there and then ran in. Oh no, she blasted ass. She must have had her ass poking out of that hole and ruined my dog and my it's pretty rough.
And it's weird because you get closer to it, it smells just more like chemical. It doesn't smell like skunk.
Yeah.
It's just a weird chemical smell.
Yep.
And it's like the
yep.
dogs get Butterfly got hit in the face, his eyes water, nose. It's like pepper spray. And you know, you don't know, and you let them in. Hey, come on in, and she comes running in. You get the smell, and you can't get them. They're under the bed rolling.
Yeah.
It's like no. The
I
whole
couldn't
house
get to
smells
her
like
fast enough. I knew damn well she got hit, and I couldn't get to her fast enough. And she's on the couch, and she's on the chair, and she's heading for my bed. And I stopped her before she ruined my bed. And then finally, my wife got out of bed, and oh my god, yeah, it was good times. But I just, you know, just basically just want to let everybody know that I'm suffering.
Well, we're glad this isn't in smell-o-vision because I'd have to leave. I have to check out.
So it's, you know, but you're welcome. You're welcome.
All right. Well, I don't have a story as cool as that other than, you know, we had a great time in Marquette, a lot of fun, packed house. We did pretty damn well. We had fun and definitely want to go back. It was fun. And the way home, I listened to nothing but Helloween for 5 hours. It was great. No one to complain or gripe.
This is my shocked face.
Yeah. Right. We'll get to that in a minute, but let's dig into some stuff that I've been spinning here. Say what you want about Anthrax. These two new albums are great. Worship Music and For All Kings, Joey's Return. These albums rule. They're well written. They're well produced. Joey is on fire, man. And I just, coming back to this album particularly, the songs on here are so good. I don't know. I'm on a bit of an Anthrax kick again. I watched their during the pandemic, their 40-year anniversary. They put like every week a new history video through their whole catalog. I've watched the whole thing. Pulled out my Anthrax, driving around, listening Among the Living, cranking it loud, and driving to practice Monday, cranking Among the Living, driving through the gut of downtown with the windows open, just like I did when I was a teenager when it came out. I'm thinking, I feel bad for the people that outgrow metal. I mean, what the hell's wrong with you? This is great. It's like a time machine. I'm suddenly, you know, however old I was when that came out. But, yep, it's been fun listening to Anthrax. These are, for those that might be a little apprehensive, these are great records. Check out Worship Music. Check out For All Kings. They're both excellent albums. And I decided to pick a bunch of Helloween stuff from my trip that I don't listen to as much. So I took Keeper of the Seven Keys, The Legacy. This is my least favorite of the Darius era. But my kid's been listening to it. He bought his own copy. And he was telling me, he said, I think it feels like a Keeper's album, Dad, which was weird for a 14-year-old to say. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to see. And, you know, I don't know if it feels like a Keeper's album, but it's a good album. The problem with it is it's really long. It's a two CD set. It's very, very, very long, but I really like it. Darius is awesome. I love him. I love his voice. I love the songs he writes. I love how he works with Helloween. And I've grown to appreciate this album a lot over the years. I know it's one of Alan's favorites from this era, and I see why. It's really good. Just a little bit long. And lastly, it's on my iPod. I go to bed listening to this album every night, the self-titled Depressor album, recorded in 95. This thing, it's a pitch shifter worship, a little more underground, a little heavier than Pitch Shifter. But this album rules. I really, really like it. I like the Filth Grace demo or EP thing too. this early stuff from this band is excellent. So Kellen, if you're thinking of checking out more stuff along, this is right up the alley for sure.
Perfect. I was going to say that looks like Jim's nightmare. Probably that it's going that album.
Yeah.
Oh, I would not sleep peacefully to that as you.
No. But the reason we are here tonight, we're going to discuss this album. This is the original cassette I bought when it came out, Within the Prophecy, from Sacrilege. This is their second album. Following up this one, this is a reissue, so it's a different album cover. Within the Realms of Madness. But we're here to talk about Within the Prophecy, this guy right here. So, first impressions. Jim, we're going to start with you. On the artwork and the album.
I have the artwork. I don't really pay much attention to it.
It's weird. It's weird.
Yeah. It doesn't really bother me. I guess I should actually look at it while we're talking about it. So, or if you just want to hold it up again, so I don't have to pull it out.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, there's a little bit of like, there's Flight of the Nazgul on here, Search Eternal. I mean, I don't think it's completely out of whack. It's got this kind of like sort of mythic cemetery thing going on, and there's like a little evil bird there, so yeah, I think it works. It doesn't bother me at all. You're the guy who put the spin on the radar for me. I don't know if you remember, because I hadn't heard of them, and you're like, hey, this is the band that really influenced Bull Thrower, and so I immediately checked it out and immediately bought it because the guitar tone was definitely there. You could absolutely tell the guitar tone similarity between that and Battle There Is No Law, and even Realm of Chaos. But I mean, first impression was I really dug it. It was I was stunned at how much Bull Thrower I was hearing. When I played it. I was like, wow, man. And to your point, going back and reading interviews and stuff, like they were really honest about it. They were like, yeah, we listened to a lot of Sacrilege, man. That was our band. And so they were always really upfront about.
They're all friends too.
Which, I think Tam does some guest vocal spots on Memoriam's last album or album before that or something like that. So it totally makes sense. But I thought it was crushing from the start. Tam's vocals are probably my least favorite part of the sound. Though I couldn't imagine Sacrilege without her vocals now. I'm so used to hearing it. But I want to say it didn't take me any getting used to, but it was she doesn't have like a quite on this album anyway, like a lot of variety in the way she presents her vocals, but I think it's so different of a dynamic in comparison to the music, that I think it has staying power, So definitely first impressions for me. I liked it from the start. Completely got the Bolt, how they influenced Bolt Thrower, and I think the cover, I think it fits the music, man. I think it fits the song titles. I mean, they were already kind of dipping into that sort of like, Flight of the Nazgul, man. You know what I mean? They were getting into our modern mythology there. Lyrics like, with titles like Search Eternal and Sights of the Wise, you know what I mean? Yeah, this, I think embracing that fantasy on the cover makes sense. So that's me.
Right on. Kellen.
So the album cover, I actually like the contrast between like the color scheme and even like texturally what's happening on the logo versus the background. The part that I take issue with on the album cover though is just that woman. Like she's just an odd, like it just to me does not fit the rest of it. It's a very strange face and pose for her to have going on there. If it was something different as a central figure, I probably would enjoy the album cover more, but that was the one weird thing just looking at the cover. The first impression musically, That guitar tone is the first thing that grabbed me listening to this. When I was getting into crust, I kind of came at a different time period. It was like Skit System and Wolf Brigade and stuff like that, turned of the millennia. This to me sounds closer to like Discharge sort of influenced crust. There's a little bit more D beat here, and I don't know. I guess I spent a good amount of this week reflecting on kind of how odd the UK thrash scene is. It's kind of an interesting world, and like, it kind of gets into your question a little bit later. I was thinking about like English Dogs, for example. They have also a very strange catalog. Sabbath is another sort of strange thrash band. Anyway, the UK scene was difficult to sort of pigeonhole, and
they're late to the party too.
Late to the party. This comes out in '87, so what is going on in thrash? If you kind of zoom out, this sounds kind of, I don't know, simplistic, but to get to your point, they have so much of an explicitly stated punk sort of root going on. I just kind of immediately, to Jim's point, the contrast between what is your love affair with the guitar tone on this record and the contrast versus Simpson's vocals is sort of like the endearing quality here for me. I did not, when I first heard this band, I hadn't necessarily made like the explicit connection, which sort of leading in from last week, you were sort of talking about sort of the bolt thrower connection here in terms of so I could definitely hear that on this record, but I also spent a good amount of time kind of thinking about this band, this record in context with sort of UK thrash and how they fit in.
TJ.
Yeah, so for me too, that my first introduction to this band, it starts with Bolt Thrower. And I'd heard this previously. It's been a while. It almost seems like we might have played this out at band camp one year. I'm almost positive that's probably right. But I haven't listened to it in a while. And I mean, it's crazy when you do listen to it, because you can just totally pick up on so many devices in their sound that Bolt Thrower definitely leaned hard into.
Guitar tone and the playing style, the way that they come in on these riffs kind of late, it's like a weird hesitation.
Yeah, yep, very much. Even song arranging and some of that stuff is very reminiscent of the way they write things. There's just a lot of stuff here that really influenced that band. And I'm surprised. It's unfortunate. My first impression is that I really enjoy this. There's, things we'll get into, but it's a pity that they weren't able to take this farther in that 25-year hiatus that they had. They couldn't have done more with it. And then, really my first impression of this is just that they're a very cool and singular band that has influenced a lot of things for a very small catalog that they have. And for the time, 80s, I mean, they're just, I don't know. It's always kind of crazy to me how these bands kind of, especially the UK bands, how they kind of come out of this punk aesthetic and then they just walk into this other, how they just so sharply change their style and become something so much more singular and different. Just the tone and the feel of the way they write songs on this, it's just crazy, how they got there from, somewhere else. But it's really cool. So, but yeah.
Well, I got this right around when it came out, and I bought it because it was on Metal Blade, and it looked like a Fates Warning album, or a Fates Warning or a Candlemass album. The logo, the title, the way the album cover looks. I bought this and didn't know what to think of it. I didn't dislike it. I liked it. I just felt like I was getting something way different from what I was listening to at the time, which was all the Metal Blade style bands and some of the thrash stuff. And, you know, I had yet to really start getting into the heavy stuff. So this was, it was a bit much to take. And the mid-paced nature of the whole album, it isn't a just sit and world rock to it. You have to really kind of process this stuff. I mean, you have to really listen to get what's going on in the music, to me anyway. It wasn't until years later. I never got rid of the tape. I always liked this. It wasn't until many years later. I mean, I put this on now and it's like, there it is. I get it. I get what they're doing now. And I like what they're doing. I like crust. I like punk. I like the metal hybrid. I mean, if your first impression, if you want an idea, if you never heard this band, what to expect, 3 bands put together that sound like this band. You got Amoebics, Arise. There's definite crust punk vibe to this music, mixed with an album that came out 2 years later, Axe Grinder, Rise of the Serpent Men. More UK crust, came out on Peaceville, mixed with Détente, Recognize No Authority. This is Dawn Crosby on vocals, who rest in peace. She went on to be in Fear of God, passed away some time ago. But her and Tam sound very similar, though Dawn Crosby had more of an aggressive vocal style. So, I mean, those are 3 bands, if you can kind of conglomerate all them together. And then, of course, Bolt Thrower as well. I mean, there's no denying the first couple Bolt Thrower releases. It just smacks of this stuff big time. The riffing style. Sacrilege came out, their first demo in 84, and Bolt Throwers came out in 86. So, I mean, obviously they're running the same circle. We didn't do any history. I forgot to do the history. Do you guys want to hear a little history of this before we get going?
Sure.
So that people who might not know. Sacrilege is a band from the Midlands region of England, originally formed in 84 by guitarist Damian Thompson and vocalist Linda Tam Simpson and Tony May. Originally rooted in hardcore punk, their sound later changed to thrash metal and doom metal. Despite having played relatively few gigs during their original existence, Sacrilege is recognized as an important band, both as an influence on later crust punk, thrash metal, and doom metal bands, and as an example of the blending of hardcore punk, radical politics, and thrash/death metal that occurred during the mid-'80s, making Sacrilege one of the prototypical crust punk. That term not coined then. That term wasn't coined then. Bands of the time. In 2014, Sacrilege announced work on a brand new album, tentatively titled Emptiness Intoxication. After a 25-year hiatus, the lineup talks about the lineup. There's a couple members that were in memoriam, and English Dogs and all that stuff. So that's the overall history of the band. But yeah, my first impression was this band. At the time, I didn't get it, but now I look back and it seemed like they're kind of ahead of their time of what happened in the UK with the grind, the Grind Crusher and the earache bands. They kind of were ahead of their time and didn't really, move on from there, which I'm going to get into here in this question I got for everybody. Time and further investigation proves that crossover wasn't limited to the US only, as many in the punk realm began taking inspiration from metal. More of a refined aggression, more attention to detailed riffs, a different avenue of aggression. Sacrilege were one such band who evolved out of their punk roots to embrace more of a heavy and well-rounded attack without losing sight of where they came from. Their influence on the English scene is noteworthy, yet the band seemed to struggle with their identity as they progressed. Was the band too unique for their time? Not heavy enough? Was the vocal style of Tam a factor? What do you think was the main factor that held them back from wider acceptance, even though they seem to have the bigger labels behind them? Make sense? We'll start with you, Jim.
It absolutely makes sense, man. Because they weren't on my radar until you told me about them, but yeah, I mean, I think that, you kind of hit the nail on the head when you said, when I heard this, I didn't know what to make of it. It was so different from everything that I was listening to. That was what was working against them. Here's a band that, in sound, at a distance at the time, pre Bolt Thrower, crust punk is the closest thing that you can really compare this to, And they say it's a thrash influence, though I hear more crust than thrash on this record. But yeah, I mean, getting this on a Metal Blade label, like, as just a straight metal fan listening to Metal Blade records, I wouldn't have known what to make of it either. I mean, it is so. If you put your mindset back to 1987, nobody's guitar sound was as dirty and rough as this in a metal band. Bands were looking more for like, not that they weren't trying to be dirty, but not this dirty, where everything is just so distorted and just raw and just, rough like this. It would typically not be accepted on even a label like Metal Blade. I'm kind of surprised that Brian Slagle, chose to sign them, though. I'm really happy that he did. And I do think that Tam's vocals were probably tough definitely tough for the average metal fan to take. I mean, this is the mid to late 80s where, the World Danes of the world were taking precedence. I mean, people like, really controlled vibrato and, all over the vocal range, doing all kinds of stuff. Even Joey Belladonna, harkening back to your Anthrax discussion earlier. I mean, that was what was going on then. You know what I mean? And, Tam is basically just like barking out lyrics, punk style, over like really raw, ultra distorted riffs. So for the metal world, I think that, this was something that kind of like, whoa, what's happening here? But yet, making an impact, turning people on and ultimately influencing, much bigger bands later on down the line. So, God bless them for taking those risks and really going for, what they were listening to at the time and really just doing it their own way without caring what was going on, without caring what every other band on Metal Blade was doing. I mean, that takes some bravery right there. And, I will say I do hear, if you listen to the first couple of tracks, like The Captive and stuff, you can kind of hear it like a little bit of like, Captor of Sin or like Haunting the Chapel sort of guitar sound buried beneath all of that, like layers of distortion and stuff like that. I do think they were probably listening to that, infamous 3-song EP that most of us love.
Dude, the song Insurrection, it's almost note for note "Leave Me in Hell" by Venom.
Oh, dude, absolutely. Yeah,
it's almost the exact same fucking riff.
Honestly, man, when I was listening to, I got the record has these demo tracks as well. My reissue does, but I was listening to the stream as well. And when that song was coming back on, at first I was like, wait, because I was listening to it on my phone. I was like, wait, did it just switch to Venom? Did it go from Venom? And I was like, oh god, it's Even the production of the guitars, that open roomy sound, it sounds like fucking Venom. It's totally Leave Me in Hell for sure. Yeah. I thought the same thing. That's exactly what I wrote down. Intro riff sounds like Venom's Leave Me in Hell. Yep. What's interesting though, Search Eternal is like the last song on the original release and most releases, though. Like Insurrection was added later. So Search Eternal is a much better, I think Kellen said it in the comments, like it's a closer. Like, well, it is a much better closer than Insurrection. but anyway, man, point being, I do think that they had a lot going against them. It's just the at the time, a very unique take on guitar sound, like a thick wall, just super thick wall of crusty distortion and barked lyrics, no singing, no vibrato, just barking it out punk style. But dude, that's what makes this band what they are. And like I said, really glad that they just did what they did, what was felt right to them, and I think ended up making history because of it. They may not be a household name, but a lot of bands name drop these guys, and I think for good reason. So
right on. Kellen, your thoughts?
Yeah, like to me, listening to it sounds like a very important sort of bridge record and bridge album, but even if with female vocals, if you take, I'm trying to think when the first Nuclear Death record is. I want to say early 90s or something like that.
I can look. I saw them live and they were absolutely crushing. I saw them,
like
they're great.
But if you just kind of take like all of the influence that this band has, but it all leans into
86. The first demo came out.
Okay. So leans into like grindcore and death metal. And we're on the cusp of that sort of explosion. And this band is nowhere near that extreme, not just vocally, but instrumentally as well. Sort of they have the sonically the kind of like tone that you would need, and I can understand their influence, but they never quite make that leap into an extreme metal band. And even like their peers that would be sort of operating within a more extreme version of crust punk and death metal, or grindcore, like they don't reach that to that place either. So while I think they're probably incredibly influential as sort of serving as a transition band or transition this record as a place where hardcore punk or crossover or the UK sort of sound ends up transitioning towards metal, I don't think they actually ever make that leap into something that would be competitive or would speak to 88, 89 heavy metal fans. So I just don't think like they ever sort of make that next jump that would have required, that would have at least put them amongst peers. They kind of get to that point where they're an influential sort of point of connection, but I actually think that's probably the biggest limiting factor is they sort of serve up extreme metal, but they actually don't join the party. And I think by 88, 89, like the kind of stuff that's coming out, this is fresh in my mind because I saw Simon jump in the chat, but you have a band like Carcass appearing during this time period.
Napalm Death was before.
Napalm Death,
earlier,
yeah. Like as much as the UK thrash scene is kind of, while late to the party, is also incredibly short-lived because of the kind of countrymen bands that are appearing during this time period. So I think they just didn't have the right kind of execution as a band to sort of prolong their life. In terms of being sort of having a peer group. And then I think the UK thrash scene in general also has a very strange sort of lifespan and personality because of its time of arrival.
Right on. TJ, your thoughts?
Yeah, I pretty much what Kellen and Jim have already said. A lot of it it's pretty much, I can't argue with any of that really. I mean, look what's going on, and you got 87, so Scream Bloody Gore came out, Eyes of Horror, Possessed came out, and then this band, they're doing what they're doing, and there's this kind of proto death identity to the sound, but there's an identity crisis with the whole band because love or hate.
Napalm Death Scum came out the same year, 1987. Just saying.
Yeah, and again, see, and that's with that, look at where it took them 3 records to get, or 2 or whatever, to get the Harmony Corruption, to get into that sound. Yeah. From this kind of grind punk aesthetic that they were doing on the early stuff. So I mean, but they were all kind of heading in that way. Discharge did the same. They kind of ended up leaning into the metal sound, and whatever. So I think, again, with this band, it's just, there was just identity here. I think they hit a lot of nails on the head with the sound that they were going for in this record, and they had a great feel for it and achieved something really singular with this. But again, I think, with Tam's vocals and stuff, again, I don't hate her voice on this, and I'm with you, Marty. If I had heard this back in the day, I would have been conflicted about it. I don't know what
to think of it. I didn't hate it. I just didn't I don't know where to put this.
It was like when I bought Confessor. It's like I was so stoked to hear that band, and then he started singing. It was like, what is happening right now? What is he doing? Because nobody was doing what he was doing. And then the more I listened to it over time, I really got into it. But I was still very conflicted by, here's all this power and this powerful music, so heavy. And then this girl who is just shout barking vocals periodically with this kind of very squeaky voice, it just, you listen to the record and now, and it's like, I get it. and just the roots of that scene and everything going on at the time. I'm not as versed in it as some of you guys are. I'm not a big punk fan. There's some things that I really love, and otherwise it's just not something that's in been in my purview ever really a lot. Like a little bit. I had a Bad Brains record that I really loved, but so stuff like that. But but I think ultimately that identity was their problem, and just focus on that. But they're still I feel like with this record they were just doing really, they were hitting the right marks, but I just don't know if maybe it was enough. And again too, I think with her vocals, I just don't know if it carried enough weight for the power of the music that they were trying to build. And I don't know if it all really works. It's cool in its own right, but overall, when you compare it to everything else that was happening and where the music would ultimately go, I just don't know. I think just their stance in the scene and the love of the other bands who name drop them all the time, carried them a long way. But I don't know if it was enough to really, give them enough momentum going forward. And still, it's unfortunate that they couldn't have done more. That they would, for whatever reason, I would have been curious to have heard what might have happened in between versus 25 years. And then when they put another record out, I missed the date on that. It wasn't that long ago, right?
No, they didn't. They put out another album in 1989, Turn Back Trilobite.
I thought they put out something after that, didn't they?
No, they got back together. They reunited. They did a couple tracks for this thing, I think, the reissue of their first album. Yeah, they redid the song "Feed," "Dig Your Own Grave."
So I see. They
reunited. They did a couple tracks for this reissue.
Because because on here it's showing a release in 2024, but I see
it's a compilation of demos.
Yeah, I see that. I see that now. So I didn't look real close at it initially, but again, like I say, I think it would have been interesting to have heard further evolution and what they were doing as they they moved into it. And these guys, like what's the bass player, he'd been in all these other death metal bands and stuff, and he's playing in Memoriam and whatever. And
he was in English Dogs, and he's a live bassist for GBH at one point.
Yeah, right.
So I mean, he's in both sides of the coin as far as punk and metal.
Sure, and again it's cool, but yeah. So I don't know. I think, I don't know. I think ultimately the issue of identity, dealing with that, I think that's part of it, with everything else that was coming up at the time. So, but that's kind of my take on your question for what it's worth. So,
well, for me, looking back in hindsight, I do think Tam's vocals are one of the problems. I like her voice, and like Jim said, I can't imagine it without her voice on it now, because she really does a fine job, but it's kind of dimensionless punk shouting. She does kind of hold, some melodious notes here and there. But really, looking at the album as a whole, they had Under One Flag in Europe. They had Metal Blade in North America. So they should have been poised to be a bit bigger. But what was it about the album? Knowing what was coming out at the time, we wouldn't have known, how big bands like Bolt Thrower and Carcass and Napalm Death and all that stuff would have gotten. But Within the Prophecy is very much poised to go to that next step. Their next album, if they would have worked with more elements of speed and aggression, really refine the metal and punk thing even further, it could have propelled them maybe to the next step. But instead they put this out, Turn Back Trilobite, 2 years later, 1989. This album I've listened to twice. I need to revisit it. I don't like it. I don't like it. Her voice is way out front. They went for more of a doomy approach on it. It's a boring, uninteresting record. It's really, really disappointing. I've talked to some people that really like this record, so maybe it's just me, but I think maybe they looked at what was going on, and instead of embracing it and going faster and hanging with that crowd that they influenced, they steered away from it. they went a different direction. And I think that's maybe to the detriment, like I said, I said in the intro, they had a bit of an identity crisis moving forward. You got, a very punk record here. You've got obvious crust influences and more of a metal embrace. And you got something that's very metal, very doomy. They never capitalized on dynamics. It just was kind of, eh. So it's a multiple things, I think. They were poised in the right space at the right time. They just didn't capitalize on it, for me anyway. But let's talk about the musicality and composition of Within the Prophecy. Jim.
Yeah, man. For me, this is, much like, their Bastard Children, Bolt Thrower. It's all about the riffs for me on this record, man. The riffs are great. They're, interesting. The way they're just awash in this crusty distortion, makes even the riffs that, like I said earlier, if you kind of dig below the surface, kind of remind me of the Haunting the Chapel EP, different moments on that. Like they're so buried in that crusty distortion, and they're presented in such a unique punk way that you can't even really distinguish it for just being something just really completely original. And what I like about it is, just when you think they're like, going all in on the hardcore, all in on the crust punk, they give you these blissful moments of pure metal with really well phrased solos.
Oh God.
Great leads, man. Crazy acoustic breaks that come out of nowhere. Like what this I thought I was listening to crust punk. Suddenly there's just like acoustic break with like a, distorted riff behind it that just sounds like trad metal at its finest, you know what I mean? But really, really disgusting and dirty. And so I love that mishmash of influences that they are not, scared of, bringing, to, the forefront. They weren't afraid of being too punk for the metalheads. They weren't afraid of being too metal for the punks. And, even though like at this time crossover was definitely a thing, the fan bases weren't crossing over. Yeah, I mean, I was buying the records, but you weren't going to see me at a punk show, and most punks were going to be seen at a metal show. These guys were, like someone mentioned in the comments, they were playing squats in London and stuff like that. I mean, they were, they had an audience that they were taking a high risk of alienating, by embracing metal fully, and they didn't care. And what comes out of it are these like really cool epic moments, like on Winds of Vengeance, about 4 minutes in, there's a epic sounding kind of like, tempo change with a great lead over it. And then it goes into that acoustic break that I was talking about. And then another epic riff, like right before it speeds up at the end of the song. Fly to the Nazgul has this crazy eerie synth at the beginning of it. Like what? We're going to throw in a little bit of, proto dungeon synth in here for 60 seconds. I mean, like what is happening? I love it though. And, because none of it though, Mushi said in her comment, she's like, yeah, none of this, it doesn't make sense on paper, but it works. And I was like, that she summed it up perfectly. That is this record in a nutshell. Like it shouldn't work. It shouldn't make sense, but all of these disparate influences, come together into just this something that's very powerful. So I think, that, these guys, we're not talking about like, Jason Becker on guitar here, but the guy could play and he could write riffs and his arrangements made sense, he also did the bass on here, which, probably lends to why the performance in the bass meshes so well with the guitar. The distortion on the bass meshes so well because he was controlling both areas. And so a great balance between the two instruments and the way that they're played. The drums, are mostly tame. We're talking about a lot of mid-paced here with, some double time here and there. Not too much going on, but I think, this guy was definitely more of a crust drummer than he was a metal drummer, but he threw in some double bass here and there and kind of, was pushing his own boundaries. And, again, you can like, it sounds like a band in transition, like you said, Marty, like maybe identity crisis. I feel that word's a little harsh. I feel like they were maybe so excited about all the things that they were hearing, maybe such a big fan of all these different influences, they were just trying to pull them in. Yeah, that's the vibe I get from this. Is that like, man, I really like this, and I don't care if Joe Schmo crust guy or Jim Bob metal guy doesn't like it. I like it, and I'm gonna find a way to push this into this music, and that's what I feel like they did. Pam is sort of an enigma here. I think her lyrics are really cool and interesting. Like I'm trying to pull this up here, so I'm not going to talk out of turn. And of course, my machine is letting me down. But they're very punk, but they're also like introspective at the same time. Which it's like it has this. There wasn't a lot of that. I mean, nowadays, like, 15 years later, we're talking about emo and all this other crap. But at the time though, she's taking like this sort of like concrete in your face attack of like hardcore punk lyrics, but then putting like a little bit of like a intrigue and mystery inside of it. Just a little bit of a darkness. So and I think it adds to the overall aesthetic of Sacrilege. What keeps you from like falling down, being like truly dark as her bite, her vicious vocal itself. It keeps everything sort of like up here on the surface, but in terms of presence. But if you kind of read the lyrics, like you can see that like she's thinking beyond just like someone trying to grab you by the throat and politics or whatever. You know what I mean? There's a little bit more going on here that's looking inward, and a good balance of that concrete vocal, of concrete lyric, and something a more than skin deep. So, yeah, man, I think musicality and composition, I think it's right on. I do feel like it's not the greatest drum performance in the world, but then again, hey man, early Balthor wasn't either. I mean, they were called Drunken Slayer for a reason, and I think a lot of it was because of the drums. But yet, I wouldn't change anything, man. I mean, that's what made Balthor who they were. They didn't care. They played to the best of their ability, and it just rocks. I hate to use that word, but it just works here. And I feel the same about Sacrilege. You know what I mean? They were playing to the best of their ability. They were pushing their influences on, and I think it came together.
All right, Kellen.
So where this band succeeds is in the exact same place that Ball Thrower does, where it's not that it's complex, but it sometimes has great hooks. The riff sort of digs in and you can just ride it for a while. Like it's the same sort of appeal that Ball Thrower has for you. It's not the complexity of what they're writing necessarily, but they get the key phrases put together correctly, and you can just like absolutely dig in for the course of a handful, whatever, 2-3 minutes. The first one that grabbed me was Winds of Vengeance. That song, I mean, I think it's like around 7 minutes long, and there's parts of that where it just keeps going, and I by no means got bored. And it's the exact same kind of emotional appeal for me that Ball Thrower has. Once again, I think it's a benefit here. I like the contrast. Well, it may have been a limiting factor, but her vocal style is just completely separate and an interesting juxtaposition to the guitar tone for me. Mm-hmm. I think that's actually one of the more appealing sides of this band and this record.
You also come from a punk background too.
True, but like I think. I do think like her clean vocals have tons of like she's not apologizing for them or trying to sort of shoehorn her voice into what thrash potentially needs to be or what extreme metal needs to be at this point in time. It's like a certain amount of punk ethos commitment to it, and like screw you if you're not into it. I feel that sincerely when I listen to this.
Yeah.
I do think where this band does suffer for me, and this will be a little bit of pushback, is because the riffs are relatively simplistic. When I'm not digging the song or digging the riff, it drags for me. That's the one part about this record that I felt like did not succeed in a way that potentially the best bolt thrower record does, where there's very little sort of wasted space on a classic bolt thrower record. This to me feels like they don't have the exact same sort of caliber of riff writing. I know that's a very high standard to be like asking for, but the one pushback is I do feel that I don't quite think they have every single moment of this completely figured out. And on a couple tracks for me, like, I mean, the one Jim mentioned earlier, I actually had a difficult time with Flight of the Nazgul. I think that personally for me, they don't have this, like some of the other songs that go longer on here, they don't would get quite right on that track. And I was like a little bit sort of taxed when listening to it. But I will chime in and share a similar point that he made in terms of pairing solos with riffs, and finding within a punk sort of framework to have a little bit of guitar flair to this record. I still think while they're sort of treading sort of early strides into what a heavy metal record needs to be, they get this at times, like on the closer. There's about midway through that song, there's a riff and sort of guitar sort of synergy happening. It's perfect heavy metal, like, and even within a thrash metal listen. So, I think this it does have some shortcomings in terms of the songwriting, just due to how elementary it is often. But when they get it right, it's perfect. And there's a few moments, even on the faster songs. We'll get to my favorite track here, but to your point about sort of the Slayer thing, the Fear Within, that song, in terms of one of the faster tracks here, I think is a great thrash song, and probably the closest, in my opinion, that they get to the genre here. So a lot of good stuff, but I did feel a little bit sort of taxed at times in terms of songs not being interesting or complex enough.
All right, TJ.
Yeah, so the pacing of all these tracks, they tend to, all these songs tend to follow the same kind of midline.
Is your mic muted? Is your mic?
Am I muted?
No, you're not muted, but you're real kind of muffled. It's like it's under.
Oh, I know why. Because it was down there in the nether regions. There, is that better?
The skunks or the skunk.
Because now they're talking to the. It was checking up. They're probably trying to get away from the other smell. And anyway,
it was down there by skunk nuts.
Yeah. This is easily less worse. Yeah. So the songs overall, this record, there's a pacing on this record that kind of front to back, where this is this kind of mid-level pacing, where the songs kind of never break out of. That does get a little tedious. I think to Kellen's point, at least that's the way I took what he was saying. I like everything on here, but it just kind of, every song, there's just kind of these weird delays when they come in and things like that. And it just this kind of mid-pace feel to everything. Even in the faster stuff, they don't really kind of break above a certain BPM. But arrangement wise for the songs, I was really surprised at how well these songs were put together. How, they're not as messy as you might expect, for a band that's still kind of fumbling its way around this, a style change, or moving into a new kind of direction sonically. They're still very sensibly arranged and really done. And again, the riffs on this record, there's just some cool stuff on here. Now, Marty and I were talking earlier, and I had been listening to this through headphones, and my God, the production through headphones was just so bad. There was spots in this record where I couldn't hear any of the guitar. It was just all lost.
Your headphones must suck, dude, because
it's just certain things, and my earbuds sometimes just come across that way. Generally, the ones that I have, but when I put it on the system finally, that all went away, and it was still muddy, but to when Marty and I had talked,
Well, it's very. It sounds like a crust punk record. It sounds just like a crust punk record.
It's good. It's you the room noise and everything, but I'm getting a little bit ahead of it. But yeah, they definitely, and they really like their long intros, which is a little weird. But I mean, Bolt Thrower was doing that stuff too. But I don't know. They utilize some of these things in a different way that just work for them, in a way that here it just seems they just start jamming away. I feel it's like I'm listening to the song, like the first track, I'm like, boy, that's really weird to open a record with this huge instrumental, and then all of a sudden she starts squeaking away. I'm like, oh, that's weird, but it's a really cool track. What else do I got here? Yeah, very heavy riffs, very unique. And her voice, it's just, I like this record as a whole. I like her on it. Generally speaking, I'm not a big fan of female fronted extreme bands. There's just, to my taste, there's something about it that just doesn't work for me. I don't particularly care for it. But on this here, now listening to it, like if I had listened to this back in '87, I don't know, I would have had very mixed feelings about it. I know I probably would have just kind of dismissed it, but it's cool to hear it. And she presents something that's very different, it's so unexpected, but it just kind of works in here. Again, I still think it's a weak spot overall for such aggressive music. But it just works in it. But I mean, overall, the performance and the structure of this record is just really well done. Yeah, I mean, it's not really, I mean, it's hard for me to kind of put it beyond anything like that, because just, the riffing and the heaviness of it, it's just so different and so unique. It's just really cool. So yeah, I really liked it.
Musicality, composition. For me to sit here and say I'm a big fan of dynamics, and that includes tempo. And looking at Andy Baker on drums here, he has kind of one speed. I mean, his fast isn't very fast. He went on to he was early iteration of Cathedral. He was in Cerebral Fix. He's in some crusty band now, I think. But every single song on here is mid-paced, mostly throughout the whole thing. When they pick up speed, it's a slight increase. It isn't like a fast, like Slayer. It isn't like that. But typically that would be a big strike against an album like this. But I just like the way the songs are crafted. I like the riffs. I really like the riffs. There's an openness to these riffs that I really enjoy. And there's like these little flourishes at the end of these longer phrases that are just cool. How they kind of like they're an afterthought that just kind of happen in it. The way that they fit in the songs, I think it's really cool, and it keeps me interested. And we're going to get into the production here too, but I love the sound. I love the fact that this sounds like a crust punk record. It just sounds like it sounds mean and dirty. It sounds like they're live in a room, to be completely honest. The amp's cranked way the hell up, and it's, I don't know. Somehow it works on here for me. The riffs are strong enough that they hold their own merit, and I don't need to be entertained by tempo swings or weird shifts or stops and starts or all that stuff. It seems to be very, Insurrection. Yeah, that's the one that sounds like Venom's Leave Me in Hell. It's not on the original release, but it's on the digital version, so that's why I commented on it. But anyway, yeah, I have no problems with the musicality and composition. I think it's really great. I see why they changed drastically on the album after. Another album that was the same speed, the same style, maybe it would have been too much of the same. But I like the long intros. It seems to build up, like you're building up to something, even though they never really go fast. It's like it hints at a change that never may get there, but the riffs and the sound is strong enough to carry me through for sure. Let's get to the production. TJ.
Well, yeah, I mean, like I said, I started listening to this on my headphones, and it just wasn't coming through real well on my system in here. I definitely had a change of heart on that, and it's very cool. It's thick and heavy, and it does sound very live. I mean, that tone. It's so cool. There are moments when you're listening to that and you can hear that early bolt thrower tone. I mean, it's like they borrowed their amps or something. It's stupid.
They're in the same rehearsal space. Yeah.
Oh man, I mean, and it's essentially they're just, like JCM Marshalls or Plexis cranked to 10, through, 2 412 cabinets full of greenback speakers. I mean, that's really what that tone sounds like to me. Maybe a fuzz pedal or rat pedal or something in front of it, but there's just it's just crazy to hear it. That they borrowed that from them, and it's just a really cool aesthetic. The overall production on this, there still are moments where some of the playing does get buried a little bit.
It does,
but it's it's nowhere. Listening to it through a stereo with a little bit of volume, it all translates really well. I mean, the drums, the drums are kind of just whatever. They're not mixed really well, but they're there. It's just a cool kind of time capsule of what was going on. It's like we were talking earlier, with 87. If you weren't in the right place with the right people, you were getting the mix, you were getting the production, you were getting
engineers didn't know what to do with bands like this.
If you even the better bands that had access to better stuff, like in the States and things, it's even then it was still kind of sketchy, what you could get out of the production and stuff. I mean, like I mentioned Eyes of Horror earlier, and even that, like the production on that is really weird. It's it's cool and it's all there, but it's still just the whole overall overarching feel of that stuff at the time. It's just you got what you got, so and that's not lost on me by any stretch. Especially when we go back to any of these old bands, it's like you always have to put it in perspective and context of the time and stuff. So it's still really cool. I think for the whole of the record, I think that it's just a good production for this. It's fat and dripping and heavy and
crusty.
and it just works. So,
Jim,
the production is what makes this what it is. This is a crust punk metal album. That's if it didn't sound as dirty and raw and 4-track like and analog as this, then it wouldn't be the same band. It wouldn't be Sacrilege. It wouldn't be this record. So it's perfect for them. But I think it's what they wanted. Given that they were living that world, they were in the crust punk scene, and they were, doing these shows at that time, with that kind of crowd. So, and really embracing it all the way they did. I mean, those riffs sound as powerful as they do because it is this just drenchingly thick and raw, dirty guitar sound. The band would not be as cool without it. It absolutely has to have that layer of distortion. It's so distorted. The bass gets a little swallowed up in it, but it's still there, and it pops out here and there. I think it's there enough. For me, Tim made the comment that the drums are a little back there, and he's right about that. The toms, the guitar takes up most of the space of this album. And the vocals are on top, and the only reason they cut through is because Tam's register is high. If she had a lower register, then she would probably get caught up in the maelstrom of the guitar as well, and the drums do. But again, like that's what makes this band what they are. It's that really driving guitar sound, that I think defines this record, and certainly defined it enough where both are just like was staring at what they had on stage and were taking notes, because like, yeah, to TJ's point, it's like they just borrowed the same rig and recorded in Battle
Yeah.
Dance. It sounds so similar. But yeah, I'm not going to go too deep on this one because I think it's we've all already said it. The raw crusty attack of this record was captured perfectly, and to clean this up more would have like really gutted the effect of this record, would have gutted the power of it. So keeping it just a couple mics in a studio and just running 4 to 8 tracks or whatever they did, I mean, really captured the power and the bombast of this sound and the songwriting. And anything more than that would have, I think just neutered it. So kudos to them for, going with like, yep, it's it's really grody. And
this is all the money you have. So this is what you get and you don't throw a fit. Is what that is.
Exactly.
Yep. Kellen.
Yeah, there's the thing that caught me was just like the density of the mid-range on this record. So trying to discern where the bass is and where the guitar tone is, it's just all one solid
It's a wall.
Right, brick of right, but we in a complementary way, right? Like being able to discern that would end up sort of neutering the impact of this record. And I think it's the first thing that grabbed me when I listened to it. I also think a good degree of extreme metal records from the 1980s kind of have that. I don't want to say like recessed drum sound, but there's something that happens in terms of later production where like the distance between the drummer and the rest of the guitars playing ends up somewhere in the 90s. It gains greater cohesion, where I think so much of when they were trying to figure out how to produce these records, there ends up being like, here's the guitars and the drummer's like 5 feet back on the room sort of sound. Like it's clearly a different departure in terms of like sonic character on a record. And it's all over this. I feel that way a lot, in terms of early death metal records as well. So this coming out in 1987 and sort of as a crust punk record that influenced a lot of death metal, like I totally see that in terms of the production style. To your point about the live recording, the vocals I also think are situated incredibly well in the mix. Because there's already, just in terms of the character and her voice, it's already enough of a juxtaposition to the rest of the band members that you didn't need to put her further in front of the mix. So I think where she
cuts through the din for sure.
Yeah. It's a perfect sort of, back and forth there. And I actually like, there's other parts of the drum sound I actually enjoyed. Hearing a punk production drum sound on something that leans closer towards thrash death metal, I also really enjoy. Like a very different sort of unapologetic school of thought when it comes to drum production, entering sort of the fray on a metal record, I think is a one of those aspects where I just really wanted to crank this record louder and louder to peer deeper into the mix on it. At lower volumes, you can't really pick apart. Like I thought that Jim was going to launch into this being like that. I couldn't hear the bass. What the hell? But it's one of those records where I would really want to crank up the volume, whether you're listening to it on a system or your headphones, to try and reach deeper into that guitar mix to pull out like the top end of the bass sound. Because you have to do that. You can't do it at lower volumes with a record like this. So I very much agree with the sentiment. If anything had been changed in terms of the production, it would have not only displaced the sound of this record, but also potentially its influence on the bands that came after.
Right. And I have really not a whole lot to add to this. I like the murky nature of this. And yeah, is it a perfect production? It isn't, but I like the guitar tone so much. There's such a sinister snarl to it. There's a malevolence in this guitar tone. When he plays these little late coming fills in the riffs, it's so good. It's so good. It's to clench your teeth and go, the oranges are clenched. And yes, so good. You try to picture, me and TJ were talking about this. he was hoping for a better, clear production. I try to like, think of like a Terry Date production who produced some overkill stuff. Can you imagine like the Years of Decay production on an album like this? What would have happened? I mean, it would have lost. Jim, you're right.
No one would have bought it.
Yeah. Jim, it would have been like, what is happening right now? It would have highlighted all the flaws of it, and it's when it sounds like it was recorded incredibly loud, all those flaws are part of the sound. It's when you put it all under the microscope, it changes the whole dynamic. It's no longer a crust punk vibe anymore. It changes it, and it would probably make it super sterile. It mix all the life out of it, and it is what it is, and I like it. Yeah, you can't hear all the drums all the time, the bass, whatever. I'm so focused on the guitar sound. The guitar sound is just so cool to me. Like, I think it's funny. It sounds like they were in the same rehearsal studio as Bolt Thrower, and they traded instruments and used the same amps. And I don't know. It's funny because it's what it sounds like. But yeah, I have no complaints with the production. Is it a top of the line production? No, but it's great for what it is. Least favorite songs, Kellen.
So I may have mentioned this earlier. So the first track that really grabs me is Winds of Vengeance. The guitar tone was sort of the first aspect of this record that I immediately gravitated towards. That Winds of Vengeance, the third track here. I just so you know, I treated this as the original release in terms of the songs. So just 7 tracks is what I'll be talking about here. So Winds of Vengeance, and then my the Fear Within on side B. That's one I don't think we actually get a blast beat on this record.
No, there's none.
Right.
Very little speed.
Right. Very little speed, but the actual kind of riffing style on that, for me, gets close enough to like what a thrash listen is. Just another aspect of that, I guess this ties into the production quality. Because the way the guitars are produced, the palm muting effect, I think, also is diminished. You don't get a lot of that sort of like chunk sort of aspect.
It's all open, a lot of just open strumming.
So, but that's the one track where I felt like if you're going to lean great into like a greater sort of thrash metal listen, that stood out to me the most. And then the closer here. So for me, I treated The Search Eternal as the last track on the record. We're gonna, we've raised this point several times. When you're gonna close a record, make an impact when you do, and they navigate, for a band with a punk background, they navigate a 10-minute long song incredibly well. I think that's a
lot of long-winded songs on here. It's kind of cool.
Yeah, they do a great job. And I loved closing this record with that track. So those are my 3 favorites. Nazgul is the one that I felt was, for me, taxing. I think that song went on a little bit too long. I would have loved to have shaved like a minute or 2 off of it. But there's no bad songs there. It just carried on for a few more minutes than I was interested in. So, yeah. That's my least favorite track.
Jim.
Yeah. I definitely feel like, this album starts off, and generally speaking, better for me than it finished. My favorite songs are like kind of like all in line, like Sights of the Wise, the opener, really strong statement, says exactly who they are. You can immediately hear the Bolt Thrower love, the Captive, great marching riff at the beginning. It has like a feel and sound again. Like I mentioned before, like Harlem Chapel, which I love actually. And Winds of Vengeance, I agree with Kellen. It's a great song. That's the first time we see the acoustic break in their music, and it's followed by a really cool epic riff. And it's just like, it's so unexpected but it's so expertly done. I mean, you can tell these guys, yeah, we're punks, but we love metal, and it all comes out in that song. Like that one is a fist pumping homage to what makes metal great. I do like Flight of the Nautical, and mainly it's the synth thing at the beginning. I was so not expecting it. I just loved it. It just sounded right. And the last riff in the song, when it's about to hit the 6-minute mark, and there's a real reason why I like it is that last riff. The very first band I was in had a riff just like that, and I was immediately taken back to it. I was like, "Oh my god, man!" My old band was called Signs of Life. I was like, "That's the Signs of Life riff." We named ourselves after the Devastation album from back in the day.
Oh, right.
But yeah, but that it took me back. I was like, "Oh my god, I love that riff." Forgetting about Insurrection, which obviously was added on later and is not a great song because it sounds so much like Venom.
It's good still, but
I
like
better.
it.
It gets better.
Yeah.
The thing, like after they get through the venomness, like the verse riff is much improved, and there's double bass rolling over it. Like it becomes a better song. It's still not a bad song. In my opinion, there's no bad songs in this record. But Search Eternal is definitely awesome. It's an epic. But that's it doesn't feel like it. There's so much variety in the song that it really stands strong. And another interesting thing is like the last riff of Fear Within and the first riff in Search Eternal are nearly identical. But I think it was intentional, just in the same way how Bolthor would do that thing where they would fade out with a riff in one song, and then on the next album they would start a song and fade in with the same riff. They did it on every record just about. I wonder if they got that from the Fear Within and Search Eternal. Like if you go back and listen to how that song ends, the next one begins, it's very similar. But I was like, I wonder if Bolthor got their idea of how they did that, But anyway, I really don't have a song that I don't like on the record. It's pretty, for me, it's very consistent all the way through. So I'm just gonna leave it at that. I will. I wrote the least about the Fear Within, so maybe I like that one the least, but I still wrote something. So let's go.
Right on. DJ.
Yeah, I'm with Jim. Really, the first 3 tracks of the record are really cool and really kind of define everything going on. Side of the Wise, that opening riff, it sounds like Show No Mercy. Sounds like Slayer. Captive and Winds of Vengeance, that acoustic thing that happened. I'm like, what's going on right now? What in the hell?
It's so cool though.
It's really good.
And then they go with that triumphant riff and the solo comes over. It's like,
right. Yeah, it was just so
like you're on top of the mountain with a pit bull on a binder twine and a sword.
It was so out of left field. It was so out of left field. It was just like, what the hell? But yeah, I don't have any dislikes in here. I think every track on here is really listenable. So I'm good.
What's up, Rick? All right, for me, I mean, there's no real complaints here. I have nothing on here I dislike. Sight of the Wise, I mean, we start off right away. Such an epic opener. The openness of the riffs inspire a lot of flow and motion, which is established throughout the whole album. Atypical playing style makes this band special. It's true. My favorite song on the album, though, is Winds of Vengeance. Obviously, it's within the style set forth at the beginning of the album, but that brief, clean guitar line comes in. It's so but it's so well done. And then they followed up with that triumphant riff with a solo over the top of it. It's such a mature dose of songwriting that piles on the atmosphere. There's a lot of atmosphere on this record. It's very, very good. The Fear Within, melodic dissonance emits from atypical chords. They start doing this weird thing with the chord. It's like adds a dissonance to it. It's so cool. Then they fall back into the mid-pace plot. It's a very catchy headbanger of a song. I put Insurrection on here in case those of you that may not know a lot about the crust punk aesthetic or whatever, but the metal punk hybrid, this Insurrection, it wasn't on the original pressings. It's in the digital though. I mean, it starts off like Venom, the song Leave Me in Hell. It's almost note for note the same riff. it just confirms the metal punk hybrid, because Venom, I think, is one of those metal punk bands that a lot of people know and can agree upon as being a metal and punk band. But so that was worth mentioning. But I have nothing on here that I dislike. It's all good from start to finish. Let's talk about Judgment. Final thoughts. I think I know where we all stand. TJ.
I think this is a really good record, and it's really cool to finally have sat and had some time to listen through it and connect with it. You know, to hear those influences and even the stuff that they wear on their sleeve in this. It's really cool. I give this an 8, and I might actually go out and buy this rather than wait to come stumble across it.
You're not going to I've never stumbled across this in a while ever.
Yeah, probably
Ever.
not. So
other than when
I'll
I bought it
probably-
in Camelot when it came out on tape.
right.
Yeah.
Right. So I might end up going looking for this one. So yeah, I give it an 8. I definitely dig this.
Kellen.
Yeah, I mean, awesome record. I guess my contribution here, though, not only is it great, but I would grab this release not when I was looking like for a metal record. This would satisfy for me like a punk sort of mood, right? So in that sense, I pictured, you know, when I was fielding this question or thinking about it prior, you know, if I find it in the wild, like if this guy knows going to happen or not. But if I found it in the metal section, it might be like a surprise. If I would go looking for it in the punk section, and like I would definitely be pulling it off of my personal shelf when I want crust, as opposed to like a thrash listen. So
Then followed up with some Extinction of Mankind and Agnesy, and would be
there's
great.
your afternoon.
Yeah. Yep.
But yeah, it's a killer record, and I am less inspired to go. You know, the first one I would also check out after
really
our
good.
conversation this evening.
It's good.
I think the band seemed to go the way of Lee Dorian, so probably stay away from the third release. But
I mean, give it a spin. I mean, there's
Okay.
people in the chat tonight who are told me to give it another chance, because it's very doomy. It's just not where they should have went. You know, it's weird. Where they should have went, in my opinion, which means nothing, but you know what I mean. All right, Jim.
Yeah, definitely. Really enjoyed this record. As soon as I heard it, bought it immediately. It's a solid 8.5 for me. Every time I listen to it, it's one of those records that just puts me in a good mood. Yeah, I really enjoy it. I just love the power and the effect of it. It's unique. Even though a lot of bands took some influence, specifically both or from their style, like when you just listen to Sacrilege on their own, you can consider who their peers were, quote unquote, at the time in '87. I mean, they were off in their own world, and I'm still blown away by that they came up with this crushing guitar tone that for me changed my metal world, because that led directly to Bolthrower, which I heard on the Grind Crusher comp. I heard World Eater, and the rest is history. It's became a desert island band for me. So, knowing where that sound stems from and hearing it, played, just as effectively, it was eye opening for me, and also a great relief to know that, like, once again, metal just proves that you can just keep going back and back, and and everyone was just playing off of each other. Everyone was borrowing from each other and taking something and putting their own mark on it, or improving it, and that's what's great about music in general, but specifically metal, because we've got all these like roots, and veins, if you will, connecting everyone, like the branches of Yggdrasil, but yeah, so yeah, definitely absolute keeper for me, and I think if you're a Bolt Thrower fan, you should own this or get it soon.
Yeah. Whoa, what did I just hit? That's not good. There we go. For me, I think, I mean, obviously I've had this a long time and I really like this album, and it's an 8 album all day. I agree with everybody assessing it as an 8. There's nothing wrong with that there. And I think it's cool for those that are big fans of Bolt Thrower to hear, even Bolt Thrower themselves in interviews said Sacrilege were a big influence. You know, they're friends with them and you can hear it. You hear this album, the first notes, the sound of the guitars, the first notes of this album, you're like, oh, okay. So for that, I respect it. Do I think this is an essential album? Man, and it's funny because even here, Mike calls it a thrash band with doom. I don't hear thrash on this. I'm kind of with Kellen on this. I hear this as a crust punk record with metal influences. I do not hear thrash on here at all. It's not necessarily a fast record. It doesn't present itself. There's thrash elements. It just doesn't present itself as a thrash record. It's way more in the other realm than it is there. And
yeah, I feel like it's more like crust, like proto death. It's
Yeah.
kind of and because I don't get that same sort of thrash vibe from it. That's sort of like polka beat, really clean, sharp guitars. That is not a diss. You guys know I love my thrash.
Sure.
But that's not what I hear when I hear them. I hear that, I feel like the grime on my hands and arms when I listen to this, and ears, and that's not a feeling I get from thrash.
No.
So.
And, you compare it, you hold it up against some of the other thrash bands that were big in England, Sabbath, they sound nothing like that. Acid Rain, Cerebral Fix, there's something there, but I'm going to be grabbing this before I grab Cerebral Fix. I'm going to be grabbing this before I grab Zentrix. I'm going to be grabbing this before I grab Hellbastard. I only had one Hellbastard album, The Natural Order. It was their thrashy breakthrough record, and I didn't like it. And I have not heard any of their crust punk stuff. So I think it's a great album. It's a great English album. I don't know that for a bunch of people watching that run out and buy this album right away. I don't think it's going to reinvent the wheel for you. I don't think it's going to be that thing that trumps listening to Bolt Thrower, but it's good to hear where Bolt Thrower comes from. And I do really appreciate and respect this album. I think it's really good. If I didn't have it, I might go out and buy it because I'm sick, as Alan says, sick little monkey, and have to buy stuff. But thankfully I own it already, and I have all their stuff, and I enjoy all their stuff. But it's good. I enjoyed it, and good album. Thank you again, everybody, for checking it out. Whoever listened to it in the chat tonight, awesome. Thanks for doing your homework. And who picks? Is it TJ's turn to pick? All right, what you got, man?
Well, I'm debating. Are we ready for another battle? Are we ready for that? Another head-to-head?
I don't want to listen to garbage prog shit.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, you do. You have no idea what I'm proposing. You don't even know.
I don't know.
You don't even know. I tell you what. Let me run it by you.
I'm too fat for my sweater. That's all I got to say. I don't want to go and buy another sweater in our hairless cat dye.
No,
Right, but I think you're saying do we want to listen to 2 records, right?
Yes. Another battle. Another battle.
I thought you meant a battle of like you like it and no one else does.
No.
That's the battle I went to in my head.
I've got those here, and I'm just trying to read the room, fellas. I'm trying to read the room, but I feel like this has come up in conversation, and I've threatened this one a few times, but I think there's a debate to be had here.
Okay, let's do your battle then.
All right, so let's do this. So it's going to be one. It's going to be the same band. And
well, I already know. I saw what you're holding, and I already know who wins.
Yeah,
I already know which album wins.
So, Pestilence, Consuming Impulse versus Pestilence, Malleus Maleficarum. And my proposition is we go away from this, and then when we come back, we pick our winner, and then we'll debate that. Whatever. If we're split, we'll team up and we'll fight against each other. However it turns out.
You lost me. What?
Get out the crayons and the construction
too
paper.
Complicated already. I'm telling you.
You go away and you decide which one you want. What's your winner? And then bring it back next week, and then we'll debate What's
So
what?
we're not covering. We're just gonna pick our winner and then.
But yeah, but you
show-
still got to listen to both of them. You still got to listen to both of them.
Listen to both and defend which one you think is better.
Yeah, basically, whatever.
But we're gonna still follow the same outline.
Yeah, whatever. But I figured, why not? Why not do that? Does that make sense? Hey, listen, I can stop right now and I can just pick this one right here. This one, you guys will love this one.
I'm sure.
Saxophone.
No, I'm fine with the battle. I just
All
don't
right.
understand the terms yet, but yeah. Okay.
Just we're gonna come back and you're gonna explain to us why you think which one's better than the other.
Well, they
Which
sound like two
one-
different bands.
They do, but
Yeah.
but to me, as much as I love both of these records, there's one that wins the fight for me. Why?
I already know which one you're gonna pick.
Well, you do, but
I
they,
do.
they don't. Those playing the game at home, they don't know. They don't know who's going to win. They don't
Right.
know what's up.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. Yeah, that's it. And then I think next week it's viewer's choice again, right?
I think, I don't know. We can do that. That sounds fine to me.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, that's it then. First of all, I want to apologize to everybody for the fact there was no reviews this week. I've been busy. We played a show in the UP. Busy. I'm hoping to tonight get Kellen's review edited and up for tomorrow. And there's also a double review by Simon and a review by Melanie. And we're going to be adding Sue Verica to the review team too, from Metal Maniacs fame. So she's going to be covering the new Accept album coming up as well. So lots of fun stuff happening. There might be another TJ review one of these days too. You never know. He said never again, but yeah.
Probably not.
And maybe
Well-
Jim even. Jim was talking. He was talking. There's whispers in the wind. But
Got to be something I care about, and I got to have the right motivation to do it.
Right on.
I don't know. Probably not.
But show notes moving forward. We've got Hunter Ginn from Radical Research, drummer from Agalock, joining us on Friday to talk about our favorite releases from the year 1993. That should be a fun one. And yeah, and please go check out Iwa's recordings. Lots of fun stuff and some awesome cheap prices on some cool tapes and whatnot in the link in the description. Please go check out Killing for Company. We just put up a video now, episode 1, talking about genre exploration, Zero Power Metal, episode 1. And he introduced some pretty cool bands. Is it something you're going to continue with on the regular, or is it something you're farting with?
Yeah, I mean, this year it'll be something that I cycle through. So every once in a while, I'll pick out a new group of 3 or 4 records and talk about them.
Uh-huh.
Right on. TJ, what you got going on? Other than skunk patrol, you better get some exterminators in there to remove those.
Oh, I gotta go buy some concrete and fill that hole in. I don't know. Otherwise,
Well, you got to get the skunks out of there.
Well, I mean, obviously, Alan was suggesting fireworks and firearms, which I have in abundance, but shooting skunks just means dead, smelly things. We'll try to get them out first and figure it out. So just with my luck, I'll shoot a big hole in the floor in here, and
They'll come in there and spray you.
yeah. So, I guess I can always have my kids come over and chase them under there, and make them get them out. So I don't know. We'll figure out something. Figure it out.
Well, thank you everybody that joined us tonight. A good turnout, and we will see you Friday. Some of us and the rest of the team here will see you next week. So cheers, everyone. Have a great week.